For my second session of day one, South by Southwest, I had the opportunity to attend the keynote speaker of Breaking Barriers, Shaping Narratives, How Women Lead On and Off the Screen. Topic focusing on women, and the people that it featured were like Katie Couric, Brooke Shields, and of course Meghan Markle. To start off strong, I really enjoyed this panel as it featured five different women, one of them being like the pop culture expert and host of Nancy Yoon. And she did a really good job of diversifying her questions and asking each panelist specific examples and ways that like women can incorporate this in their own life, and every single person's head was nodding along in this session. It was a hit session, like 45-minute lineup just to get in, and there's a reason why. So first I'm going to read you some of the facts and the big things that stood out to me during my session, and then I'll give you my perspective here. So, did you know that Gen Z males, so those who are my age, 55% of them are more likely to discredit and discourage feminism than male boomers. That is absolutely scary. And each panelist touched on how they have like experienced this like oppression within their workplace as on-screen actors, quoting that it is a hospital place for women in the media and film industry. Something that made the audience chuckle but is nonetheless true is when Katie Couric said, I remember a time when harass was just 2 words instead of 1. And I don't know if that's the most appropriate statement, but it is true and proves a point of just how these gender roles and norms are hard to stray away from, especially when they're being portrayed in movies or films nonetheless. It seems that women seem to fall into certain jobs and roles and norms with, like, just throughout their daily life within movies. And instead of paving this way and making this advancement from women, and then from my perspective, like, how do you break this barrier and push through it so this is not normalized and this can be set apart within the media? So to kind of pivot, so they stated each of their own like examples of times that maybe they have had comments said to them, or whether it was social media or in person. And what I really liked about this panel is they had like an older age group, and then they also had a younger age group. So like, but before media was invented, so whereas maybe like directors were saying this to your face as much as like getting those comments on TikTok, such as like Meghan Markle. So overall, they all talked about like little life examples, but then they went on to what can we do as a society so that this doesn't keep happening further and that we can actually advance. So one of the things I really liked is they said when women advance, society should advance naturally. However, that does not prove to be true. Specifically, the statistic that the panel provided is that Barbie was the #1 movie of 2023. However, only 30% of roles last year in films and TV shows were woman leads, which I think is really interesting, as I think Barbie's entire point of the movie was to nonetheless address this, and although it's like winning multiple nominations and awards, it should continue to progress, and I do feel like there was like this counteract where almost like sat women back and people didn't understand that message. To continue on that, some more facts here. I'm a big like podcast girl. I'm actually looking at starting my own podcast, so this fact really stood out to me. More women listen to podcasts than men. Specifically, about 60% of podcast listeners are all women. But did you know that 90% of people who own a podcast are male? Which I think is a super interesting perspective. So it's 60% of women are listening to podcasts, but 97% of it is the male mind and going on from there. So there's little representation within that media outlet, hence why I like to start my own. But I think there needs to just be like an overall contribution of diversity in this regard. And then my last little fact here of the session is when Katie Couric said, and this is touching back on what I just said, but like before the media, because she's on like a little bit of the older side there, is she used to get comments like, the way the jacket is buttoned makes her look fat, or her makeup is too much for the big screen, and she gave a very personal example where she remembers she just wanted to give up, and her daughters looked at her and quoted one of her own lines from being on screen and said, "If I listen to what every witch said in New York City about me, I never leave the house." And that overall proving her point how just objectifying and bullying women, because we are not given the same comments as compared to a male. A male will never be told that the way his jacket is buttoned makes him look fat. So my biggest that's the overall session and the facts I gathered, and then my perspective on it is that representation matters. If we do not have young girls looking at women in positions of like leadership, strength, and power, they're gonna think their goal is unattainable, nonetheless unimaginable. Your voice should not be shut out. It is 100% okay to be a deviant in a situation. It is 100% okay to stick up for yourself, and I think we need to learn how to empower other women in this fact instead of just always shielding down our own comments. And in order to make like feminism beneficial and recognizable, you have to be like vigilant about it almost, which is quite the contrary. I would also like to point out that the panel spoke on like the wrath of social media that they've all experienced. Like specifically, Meghan Markle touched on this, as I know that she does face quite the controversy in the media. And the biggest thing I took, and I was ready for her to say that question because like I like Meghan Markle. I keep up with the royal family, and there like is some drama there. So I was interested to see how she was going to address this question, and she said that how are we as women saying these comments to other women? It's literally girl on girl hate of mothers, of daughters, of sisters, and it's like you wouldn't say that about your friends, so like why do you say that about that girl? And as a supporter of women, like how do we have this? And to connect that more so into like culture and business, as I said, like as women advance, we should be advancing as a society, and this has a tremendous effect on mental health. I know many influencers that have hit it seen many influencers who have hit it big, and they literally had to backtrack and lose all of that they had because of the tremendous effect of mental health that they've had on them from comments from their own from women themselves. So how do we like allow this behavior in everyday life? Like I think this goes beyond just the business industry, beyond the tech industry, beyond the marketing industry, beyond any industry. Like as daily functions of life, like how do you allow yourself to like say those comments, nonetheless how do you not take them as they are said? And I just really liked how they like broke down this panel, and it really had me thinking in my own mind. I was like, so first they like gave the examples, each one of them, which is like vastly different, and then they broke down like, so what can we like start doing? And every single conversation that has created change has started in as small as room as those five, and as big as room as that ballroom D that we waited 45 minutes for, and showing that, and like main takeaway being that like we as women have to have that strong voice and constantly fighting the battles of negativity. I really like this session. I wouldn't say that this is something that like I looked at my map and I was like, I definitely have to attend. And I'm so glad I did, because they all had various perspectives and really good examples in that regard. Nonetheless, breaking down like comments, social media, like how to empower young women. And I find this inspiration in my own life because I think like we've all had a time where like someone said something bad about us, and like we've all said something bad about something else, and it more so this panel shifted my perspective. And that's my biggest takeaway from this right here, is being like very conscious in my relationships and how others are with one another in those relationships, and then deciding like if like that friendship's gonna work like based on these. So although not necessarily industry connected, this was more of a personal connection for me, and like how can I be living my truth and have like my heart resembling what I would want to be said about me. So I just think overall there was like a tremendous ripple effect, and like if you were in the room you could absolutely feel it. So this was definitely a standout session to me.